Welcome back to another episode of Curiosity, Not Judgment. My name is Birga.
And I'm Gary.
So this past week, I was at the gym and listening to a podcast, and I was about 20 minutes in, and I thought, oh my goodness, I have got to send this to Gary. And it was a podcast where the interviewers were talking to a gentleman who had recently written a book about curiosity. And of course, since that
What?
is, I know, since that is the nature of what we've been all about for the better part of close to 2 years now, I wanted you to hear the interview as well and wanted to discuss it a little bit. And I know for me, who I have a tendency to be very competitive shy. I don't like when things start to get competitive. I thought to myself, like, oh man, somebody beat us to the punch. He already wrote the book. I guess we don't need to do it. And kind of felt a little bit Eeyore about it. But I'm thinking that you had a very different response.
I did. I was like, wow, this is great. Let's hear what he has to say. And then figure out how we can add to that in our writings. And so, yes, it was a different approach. And it's interesting. I want to practice something that I've only learned recently in my life. And that is, asking questions about these things called feelings, right? So I want to ask you, how did that make you feel, Birga?
It made me feel a little lazy because I know we keep talking about writing this book and it keeps not happening, and for many good reasons. But of course, reasons can also be labeled as excuses. So I felt a little bit, I suppose, lazy. But then I felt a little bit defeated, I suppose, if I'm being honest. I thought, well, somebody's done the work that I should have done. And there you go. He beat us to market.
Yes. And if that were the last song ever to be written, I think we'd be I would be with you. But there seems to be new songs coming out every day. I based on the same notes, the same chords, the same kind of beat, etc. And so yeah, no, my reaction was not that. My reaction was more of a wow, like I said, can't wait to hear what this guy's viewpoint on this is. uh, and um, and he did have some really good points,
Mhm.
points that you and I probably wouldn't have gotten to. Um, it did make me. I do have a similar tinge as you, though, as like, oh my goodness, there we go, somebody executed. I'm a provisional thinker. I'm very much a visionary, somebody who likes to think and pride myself on being 20 years out and looking backwards and all that kind of thing. And it's not better, it's just different than other people. And so I often see things. When I was a kid, I thought of the what became the CD player long before. I thought about my album sitting over there spinning, and wouldn't it be great if you could put it into something where it didn't matter what direction it was in and carry it with you,
Mm.
and I thought, and then when a CD player came out, I thought, drat, that should have been my idea. But you know what? I didn't execute,
Mm.
and thank goodness we have CDs, right?
Yeah.
And that's okay. I have a There's a big difference between ideating something and having a vision about it and actually carrying through and executing it. As a matter of fact, if I'm really honest, whenever I'm in a new company, what I try to do is surround myself with people who are executors, who can execute the crazy stuff that I come up with, right?
Yeah.
Because, and it's a good synergy, it's a good symbiotic relationship if done well.
Yeah.
Thank goodness we're all different, right? And there's going to be some people who do things. Now, there may have been something that spurred him to write that we just haven't experienced yet.
Yeah.
He might be the exact same as us. He might have been thinking about this for 20 years, where we only been thinking about it for two. And yet something made him sit down and write a book. At some point, that will happen to us. I'm very confident.
Yeah. You know, this is such an interesting way to look at a problem, or what could be viewed as a problem, I suppose, and how we approach it from two vastly different viewpoints. And I know we're not the only ones that have come up against something like this. In the workplace, maybe someone has presented a proposal that you had in mind, you had drafted, ready to go, and just for whatever reason, their email got in first, or they got to the boss first. And so what happens when someone beats you to the punch, so to speak, and how do you process the work and the time that you've spent developing an idea and trying to figure out, is there still merit in it? Is there still value that I need to have this thing come forward and be seen by others? Or do I let it go because someone else has won the race?
Yeah, I have a very specific example on this. When I was in my Intel days, we were trying to figure out a way to communicate with everybody in an organization. And that's part of the problem. I mean, it's how do you communicate new ideas, new policies, new thinking, new ways of doing things across a broad number of people? You and I thought about this a lot when I was at the city. How do we, and you've done it in your own nonprofit world where you're trying to communicate something around everywhere. And I used to lament, nobody listens to Walter Cronkite anymore. There's no way to get something across to everybody because everybody's off on different news services and different ways and platforms. And so how would one do that? Well, I had this idea and I brought it up to, we were in a meeting and the head of training was there. And I was at the time the head of engineering. And I was, and we were bouncing things around. And I said, well, the one place where I'm always a captive audience is in the bathroom. And so I came up with this idea called Dear John, right? And I was going to have Dear John and write these mythical questions and have the answers. And then, and it'd be about new policy changes and new ways of doing things, et cetera. Well, the training manager, all of a sudden the next week comes out with, I didn't do anything about it. I just came up with the idea, right? The next week he comes out with this thing called Bathroom Bullets. And he starts publishing these things, and it turns out to get the attention of corporate, and it's a big deal. And pretty soon all of Intel's doing, and I'm thinking, man. So I went to him. I said, Benny, you took my idea, and he's going, oh, he didn't even. I honestly believe he didn't see it that way. He saw it as something where this thing was floating around in the ether. It came to him. His perspective was not that I had come up with the idea in the meeting, and maybe his perspective is right, by the way.
Yeah.
That we were just generally talking, and he went out and he looked at me and said, well, you may have had the idea, but I executed it.
Yeah, that's right.
Fair, Benny. Good job. And by the way, I probably would have never executed on it, right?
Yeah.
And so, look, we're all different, and we all have different attributes. And I might take action on one thing, and somebody else might take action on another, even though we're all thinking in different areas of our lives. At some point, something will spur us to action, and something spurred this guy to action.
Yeah. I do love the picture you painted about music, right? Music has been around for thousands upon thousands of years. And, maybe the first person to think of, I'm going to write a song in the key of C in a 4/4 timetable. And, they spend all this time composing in their mind, but never get it onto paper. And then, some other composer drafts something. And just because it's in the key of C in a 4/4 time signature doesn't mean they're duplicate songs, right? They're vastly different.
Right.
It's a vastly different composition of notes and melodies and all of those things. And so, to the point about this book, there's been, I'm sure, hundreds of books written on curiosity in the past. And just because one has come out fairly recently that seemed to kind of be somewhat in the niche that you and I were thinking doesn't mean that that's going to cover the full gamut of curiosity, and certainly doesn't throw us out from being able to contribute into that arena as well. But I do want to ask the questions around what happens when you come up to a situation like this. How do we ask ourselves some curious questions to really examine if we do go forward, if we do, submit the proposal, even though someone's already submitted something very similar, or if we, try to create something that's just a shade different than something that's already gone to market. How do we ask curious questions around that to really make a healthy assessment on using our time and our talents and our energy in an appropriate way?
Well, I think you hit on several of them in your question, actually. And that is, several options occur to me. Whenever a situation like that occurs, not necessarily the one we're in, but just in general, I just want to generalize it 100,000 foot. Number one is, do you want to team up with the person and do something together?
If it's an option.
If that's an option. The second is, like you said earlier about competition, you want to just beat the person and come up with something even better, right? Number three is there room in the market for two of the exact same thing if you think yours is exactly the same? I mean, Uber and Lyft, right? Or the other option is to just, like you said at the beginning, is just, forget about it. Somebody else did it. I'm going to go put my efforts elsewhere. I think all of those are good questions. The other thing that I think you said was very interesting is you are self-aware. You're more self-aware than most people I know. And you said I kind of Eeyored it, right?
Mhm.
And then, well, okay, then what would Tigger do? I think a great question to ask is, if you are self-aware and you have a tendency to do one thing, ask questions the other way, right?
Okay.
The different way,
Yeah.
right? And then the other thing is too is you can start something. You don't have to start out at a sprint. You can do a crawl, walk, run, right? We could do I tell you what, let's put our toe in the water over here, see if there's a return.
Mhm.
And if not, at that point, stop. I would hate to not do something though, thinking that I had nothing to contribute when maybe that's not the case. Maybe you have something significant to contribute. And this is the world often throws things at us that if we did not have to overcome them, our work product would be not nearly as good.
Mhm. I like your question of what would Tigger do, because that gives me a whole different way to kind of visualize this. So if my Eeyore attitude is very defeatist, and the Tigger attitude is very much like, jump up, let's go, let's find another way to do it. How do we begin to ask questions to get ourselves out of that line of thinking, for those of us in the more Eeyore camp? And I love that notion of, okay, so person A has made a product or has, produced a proposal to the boss, and I didn't get in there first. So now what? What is in my mind and in my expertise and in my wheelhouse that I can contribute to this to make it even better? And for those people that really thrive on the spirit of competition, I suppose you could look at it from I'm gonna beat that guy. But if you're simply looking at it from like, hey, I've got some knowledge and some wisdom that I can contribute to this, and I want to add to, I want to make this better. I want to craft my own proposal that approaches this from a different angle. I think so much of this is personality based, but lots of room for lots of curious questions along the journey.
That's exactly right. And I think the point of this podcast, in my mind, is to never stop asking those questions,
Mm-hmm.
and to not get stuck either in a way that would stop you from doing something that might change the world. And those stories are legendary. There's a great story about the guy who ran the patent office, and I'm going to get part of these details wrong, but in general, the gist of it is it's around the late 1800s, early 1900s, and electricity's been invented and the steam engine and a bunch of other stuff, and he just looks around and goes, I think it's time to shut the patent office down. I think all the ideas have been created. I mean, this literally happened.
Wow.
And so think about that.
Yeah.
It gives some perspective when you're sitting, whenever we're sitting there thinking, what am I going to contribute to the world?
Mm.
There's all these billions of people, and whatever I'm thinking about doing, somebody else has already done. I would submit no. I would submit that you have a unique, you keep saying personality, you are a unique person.
Mm-hmm.
You live in a unique time, and we are a unique environment and space, and we are in a unique position,
Yeah.
wherever we are, to do something that's going to absolutely, by definition, be different. Now, is it going to be a lot different? Maybe not.
Yeah. I'm thinking back to the Uber and the Lyft comparison. And I couldn't tell you that one app works better than the other or one provides better service than the other, but there is something about having the choice that I think people really like. Because when you've got something that's a monopoly, it's I don't know, I guess we maybe buy in more begrudgingly as a society. I don't know if that's accurate, but that's just kind of top of mind thinking. But if you've got something that's already come to market or an idea that's already been submitted, and you've got something very similar but a different option, there may be room for it, and it may be something that is appreciated by the masses, so to speak, just simply by having been provided a choice.
Yeah, I'll never forget when I was running a home care company, and my son who's also an engineer, had come over from Honeywell and was running kind of, sales and marketing. And he heard an ad for a competitor on the radio, and he said, "Oh, Dad, this is terrible. I heard this ad on the radio for my competitor." And it's like, why is that terrible? I mean, most people gather three options when they're going to make a decision on something.
Mm,
We just need to be the best one. And that ad is probably helping us and every other home care agency
mm,
in the city. And again, you're right about the different takes and the different personalities, the different reactions. That was a Tigger reaction, right? To what could be an Eeyore situation. But I think what's interesting is, I mean, I remember very vividly back, and I don't remember if it was the 80s, when there was really two main car rental companies, Hertz and Avis.
okay.
And Avis came out and they were number two for a long time. And I'm sure there were some people being very frustrated at Avis about that. And what they did is they came out with a campaign that said, "We're number two, so we try harder. So
Mm,
you're going to get better service. You're going to get
interesting.
better, right? We're not the monopoly. We're not number one, and they're going to take you for granted. We're going to treat you special."
Yeah.
And look, I mean, maybe we could take that idea with the book.
Yeah. Were you the one that told me about auto part stores that they historically all cluster together in the same geographic location?
It's true for, I don't know if I'm the one who told you that. It's true for auto parts stores. It's true for drugstores. It's true for new car sales.
Mm,
It's true for restaurants. If you think about an Albuquerque, the I-25 corridor, there's a lot of people who would say, "Well, I don't want to be another restaurant in there." Well, yeah, you do, because people will say, "Hey, let's just go down to I-25 and then we'll figure it out."
mm,
Right. So this happened last night to me. I go out with my oldest daughter and her family every Sunday night for dinner, and we headed to a place up on Tramway, and it was a taco place. And at the last minute, we all decided, no, we want to have the pizza place that's around the corner.
mm.
Right. So you absolutely get more business if you cluster with competitors in many industries.
That's fascinating. I can imagine though, early on, if you're car part place A and you start seeing the building go up for car part place B, that sense of panic coming up and thinking, oh gosh, I don't know, can we stay afloat if we've got that competitor right across the street? But for whatever reason, it draws people, I guess a larger pool of people, I suppose, to that geographic area because they know there's choice. And so there tends
That's
to be
right.
enough business for all.
That's right. Now, we're touching on a subject that's near and dear to my heart, especially living in New Mexico, and that is, a poverty mindset versus an abundance mindset. And you and I
Mm,
have had lots of conversations about this. But if you believe that you can make the pie bigger, you don't care about your slice of the pie so much.
mm,
And that's always been my outlook. It has always been, well, I guess we need to make the pie bigger.
yeah.
Um, and I used to run associations. Uh, you and I have a dear friend that we see every Friday morning. When she came to town, opening up another home care agency, instead of going and saying, "Hey, back off, I'm going to crush you," I went over and said, "Hey, you're just starting up. You could use these kinds of clients. My tendency is to go for more of these kinds of clients.
Mm,
Let's work together." And we've been friends ever since.
that's really good. I have reached out to this gentleman who wrote the book that I mentioned at the beginning of this episode, and I do hope that he'll join us on the podcast. We'll see if his time
Me
allows
too.
him to do that. But I love that mentality of, yes, he's written a book about curiosity, and yes, he's in the publishing space where we want to be, but could we complement each other, right? Can we get a copy of his book and read through it and figure out, okay, he did an excellent job at this track, but we want to concentrate on something different, and not to serve as a, hey, we wrote a better book or we had a better product, but say, you know what, we are going to ask some different curious questions because we believe this is really important for us as, the human race, to learn how to engage with one another in a more wholesome, holistic, healthy way through asking curious questions.
Part of doing this podcast is my own personal journey, which is about being curious
Yeah.
and being open to new ideas and change
Yeah.
and different thoughts from different thought leaders. And my goodness, if you and I took the attitude of, oh my goodness, this person, I mean, I think it's great that we thought, let's have them on the podcast and chat about it, because that's the curious approach.
Yeah.
Part of doing something is sometimes for the benefit of the people doing it, because it helps them overcome something that's an issue on their own journey. And for me, this is absolutely true. I mean, I have several things to overcome with this, from procrastination to not sitting down and writing enough to, to not thinking broadly enough. Listen, it would be very easy for me to think I've got all the answers and just, sit in my own little shell and my own little brain and listen to my 3,000 voices in my head and think I've got it all covered.
Yeah.
It's not the case. And this and conversations with you once a week help me to get out of that and to do much better things. It's been a growth experience for me in my life.
Yeah. I'm glad you touched on, why we're doing this a little bit. And I think it behooves us, I think this is episode 96 or 7. I'll have to go back and look at the list, but we're getting really close to 100 episodes. And so why are we doing this? I think it's worthwhile for us to address this just maybe in the closing few minutes of this episode, to say, we had a conversation literally now 2+ years ago about what happens if you were to look at a situation with curiosity, not judgment, and how it impacts your interaction with the person that you're dealing with. And that opened up all kinds of interesting subjects for us to explore through the lens of curiosity, not judgment. Everything from how you engage with your neighbors, to your boss, to your employees, your coworkers, your children, your parents, and so many different things that I think we all struggle with. We can so easily, just because of familiarity, step into a place where we just have inherently some judgment over a situation. And when we've already come to the situation with that closed mindset, it's really difficult to make any progress in relationship, any healing, any further connection with somebody, because chances are good that they're also coming from a pretty closed perspective. And so if we lead with curiosity, it oftentimes will prompt the other person to respond in curiosity. And through that dialogue, we really can meet in the middle. And I don't believe it's a compromise in the sense of someone has, abandoned their values or abandoned their principles. That's not what I'm getting at. But it just helps us to see where someone else is coming from so that we can agree upon what the next step forward might be. And again, it's not abandoning principles or values, but it's just understanding where somebody comes from and why they think the way they do.
And how their journey could be different. And it's a real big thing for me personally on acceptance. I need to be better at acceptance. And if I can be better at acceptance, then maybe other people can be too. And doing that journey is a big deal. There's a guy who wrote a really good, one of the best works on procrastination. And the reason he wrote it is because he was a massive procrastinator.
Mm.
Right. And so I think that there's a lot to be learned by just exploring a subject. And if it's a subject that you feel like that you're personally stuck in, or you personally could have some growth area in, I mean, what better way to do that than to concentrate on it once a week?
Absolutely. So I hope our conversation, Gary, your and my conversation together spurs the listeners to really start asking their own curious questions. And I really do hope that this is a value add to somebody's day, to take 25 minutes once a week to really consider how to be curious with the things in their lives. So I know you've got an appointment to get to, and we are running out of time, but just want to encourage folks, you are more than welcome to leave us your thoughts, your comments, your feedback. Curiosity.judgment.com. Always love hearing from you. So I will catch up with you next week.
Take care.
All right. Thanks.